Hey, welcome to Inktology. Today I'm going to be going through this drawing of a Moabite warrior fighting an Egyptian warrior and kind of the whole process. Well, today's video is going to be a little bit simple. We're going to be going through the process of what my drawings start off as and how they kind of finish. A simple drawing of two characters, little scene, the build out, and some of the tools I'm using, just a normal day. And we're going to draw two warriors battling a Moabite soldier versus a, well, I'm going to imagine maybe an Egyptian soldier. And a little fantasized, a little bit brutal, swinging a nice punch and smashing him in the face. And I'm going to do the process, but here's some of the tools. Small eraser for finer lines, the pencil to draw, some pen, a 0.1 millimeter pen, and then my kind of thicker lined pens and markers. And then of course I got some tape here to mark so my page doesn't move around. And it's gonna actually just mark that on the table. Like that, because it's gonna stick around. And then I'm gonna use some of this right here, this putty eraser, to make sure it doesn't move. Put it on the other side, on the bottom. Don't want to put it at the diagonal because then it'll kind of wobble like it's already wobbling now. Stick it down, and then that should be good. Unless I hit the camera like I do, which I do. So yeah, and then of course a glove so I don't get all this graphite on my hands. And whoa, 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 whoa. Cut the little fingertips out so I can have a little bit of sensitivity to it. It's not perfect, and it definitely is not the most comfortable, but it gets the job done. My finger slides out every once in a while. I need to find a better solution. Learn how to sew or something. A ruler. So let's just begin. Okay, usually I would sharpen my pencil here, but because this paper gets dug into really easily, and sometimes if I sharpen it too much, it'll dig little crevices into my paper, and I don't like that. I'm just going to shade my characters in. I'm going to start off with kind of a simple bone structure, a skeleton structure of how I'll, and then, yeah, I'm going to start off with the two lines, the ground and the top of their foreheads, right? They're fighting. And it's going to be a side shot, so you're going to have one character kind of filling in one area, right? And then you have the other character filling in this area here. So he's going to be getting punched in the face. I want his face to be turned at an angle. I start with the heads to kind of get a good idea of what, you know, the scene. It's just more fun to start with the scene that way, the faces. Okay, and then the nose, and then he's going to have his mouth all busted open and saliva shooting out. Okay. And then the other gentleman, his head's probably going to be on the same height, maybe a little bit lower because he's probably crouched down, throwing a pretty solid punch. Let's do it like here. Then here's the fun part, is to draw the action part of his fist, knocking him out, elbow, chest, right? His back, shoulder blades, and yeah, let's just get his head in here first. Okay, and then his shoulder is going to be here. Well, let's drop it down a little bit. And then his all. You can do stick figures too. I like to do stick figures whenever I'm just trying to rush. Since this video is going to be a short video, Maybe I'll have him like trying to stab him with a blade. And these are ancient warriors, so they will have swords and blades. Let's we'll put a knife in his hand here. Okay. Torso, short and stocky. Then, so you can see here that I'm already not following the rules of the ground. This is because I didn't measure out the head correctly. But it's okay. You know, I just needed something to start off with. I can actually move this back down to the ground, which what we'll do. And I'll shorten up his glute, put his leg here, put a kneecap here, extend this back here, and then put his foot where it touches the tape. That's as far as I can go. That looks about right. Okay, and then his foot and his kneecap. So this is the skeletal structure of this gentleman, giving a good punch. And let's twist his hand up a little bit, his wrist, and give a yeah. Well, let's see. If you're punching, you're going to kind of come inward as if he's going to jab him. Having it perfectly sideways kind of seems like he's going to come upwards. So let's go ahead and erase that before I forget. And angle his hand a little bit inward so yeah, that'll be good. Okay. So his thumb, his fist. This dude is getting smashed in the head. And these guys will have clothes on, so they're not just going to be naked. But the skeleton first is always good to draw out. And then it's to his shoulder here. This guy could be a little bit thicker. So, now that I have this bone structure, let me add some of the clothing to him. Get rid of this back part. I like Egyptian soldiers, but we're going to have the Moabite throwing down hard. And so let's start shading in the eyes, the nose, give him an aggressive look, the mustache. His mouth is open, so he's yelling. Give him that bottom lip, pull down the chin. Okay. His ear's going to be back here. I guess that's questionable whether or not I want to continue with a military helmet. I think I'm going to go with more of a kind of the Arabian desert headband look. Maybe some hair, actually. Maybe I'll just make curly hair. Keep it flowing backwards. But then he's going to have a headband on, so then we'll have Yeah. Kind of like a turban looking thing would be good, cool. And then his hair will come out from underneath a little bit. We'll have this side wrap. It's got a rope structure here. Okay. Give him a nice thick beard. All right. He's looking grizzly. Maybe not a beard. I don't know if I like the beard. Now, I have pulled a lot of references from a lot of images and stuff to get my characters, and I do that a lot. And then I pre-draw them sometimes, and they come into my drawings. So it's always good to pull from photo references and even other artists. They do a really good job of building out muscles and kind of poses for you. So nothing wrong with it. Just don't want to copy it verbatim. If you can, I want to take away his beard. No, I don't. I like his beard. It's a must. And put more of a hair design. And then I'm just going to have it rolled back. Still have the flap coming because I enjoy the flap, but I'm going to make tassels. I think it's just more fun, a little more creative. I like to be historically accurate when creating these characters, but honestly, there's so little knowledge of a lot of these things, and some of the history that is there and accuracy of archaeology of these outfits and clothing are at the museums, which I don't have access to, and you just gotta wing it sometimes and hope that people don't get offended. And that's what I'm kind of doing here. But the Egyptians, he'll have plenty of information for him, for me to draw him, so that'll be nice. And so now I'm just going to fill in some of the muscles here. Okay. Now, if you want to learn muscles and the anatomy of people, there are some really good books out there, like Bridgman's. His books are fantastic. Nearly all of them. I have one on faces and hands and one on anatomy, and does a really good job of just kind of giving you the basics and the intricate, definitions of the human body in many different forms. It's probably where you should start, honestly. I don't think starting anywhere else would be that much more beneficial. I, when I was growing up, I learned to draw a lot of this stuff through comic books, and comic books is just kind of where I get a lot of my anatomy from. So there were a lot of misproportions that were incorrect because of Wolverine and these other characters that had just overly strong muscles all the time, like just really defined, like they just were not normal heavy set people. They were, they were built. And oh yeah, I'm not going to do a punch here. I'm actually going to do a. I wanted to smash him with a rock. I decided I wanted this Moabite to kind of be cheating, and it just gives a little bit more character to this drawing. But yeah. And of course I'd make a mark right here and damage my paper. In this process of trying to figure out, what he's going to wear and kind of his design, I'm just making a lot of guesses. And, I erased it a few times because I really wanted to get this more of a rural look. I took off the shielding and all this armor. He is in the story a king, but at this point, he's not going to be actually a king. He's going to be more of a defending his title, kind of coming into that kingship as a probably a general or something at this point. So his clothing is going to be still a little bit more rugged, but nicer than just a common soldier, I suppose. So he'll have a little bit more jewelry and placement to protection of his body, but mainly his outfit was going to be designed with just a higher design of fabric and textiles. I'm not going into too much detail, just trying to get the idea in there and putting in the shadows where they need to be so I can go back later with a darker pencil. Um, as you can see, I'm wearing a glove, and this shading on his arm and everything will get faded really quickly with my hand going back and forth over top the paper. I don't know if you guys are like this, but when drawing fabric, it kind of gets a little tedious and annoying because you have to try to figure out where the creases are coming from. And when it comes for like doing muscles and getting forms and shapes, I found that wrestling and TV shows with wrestling on it usually have really good guys who are in all different positions with their muscles being of different shapes and forms. It's a really good reference. I really recommend it. Or MMA is also really good. You can freeze frame that and use those guys, their positions. But for clothing, a little bit more difficult. I'm still working on some TV shows and stuff like that where I can pause it and see where their fabrics are wrinkled up and stuff. It's a really great resource since we have movies on every subject and every time period. You can really utilize the cinematography and the outfits that they put on. Now here I'm drawing his face getting smashed with a rock, and it's looking kind of sketchy because his head is kind of big, and it's not really making much sense to me right now. But I was trying to have this like epic destruction of his face being smashed by this rock, and you know the face being squished, and the gravity taking its toll to the right. And then I add the Egyptian kind of Nimes. Which is what you would see on the Egyptians. This thing kind of head wrap that falls down and flaps on the back. And there's different versions of that from the kings to the warriors and just normal citizens. And this is what I was trying to create a unique one for him. Um, the Nemes looks cool and all, but I couldn't really get it to work mentally here or visually. I just felt like maybe I'll just have him have more like braids and kind of flapping. I wanted more of an action. And this thing wasn't really doing it for me. And I'm going in here and putting on the normal, like, top part of his armor, which it's called a usek or a wesek, and it's like a broad collar necklace that the ancient Egyptians used. You've probably seen it sometimes. It's kind of also represented in medieval times as this kind of shielding, but in the Egyptian times, they had like more of a braided and different designs that kind of protected this upper body, torso, and the neck. The word usek actually means width or breadth. and it's more like a, it's just an ornament collar, and you can see it a lot on deities and gods. So I go into this book. I have an Egyptian mythology book where I go in and I can check on references and the history and make sure that I'm kind of getting close to accuracy. Of course, I'm not going to be 100% because, a lot of this information is, exaggerated here and there for historical reasons, but for mine, it's also going to be a little bit different because we're at the late Bronze Age. And I really like this braiding on this hair. I think it's a really cool design. So I'm actually, I think I'm going to erase all this and start all over because I just don't like the way his face is coming out. I don't like the way his is getting hit. I need more action. I want something more posed. So I redraw his face and his kind of the tilt of his skull. And what this actually does is allow me to once I get the whole head in place and shrink it down a little bit, I'm able to put the hair on top and have more of an action, like the hair's flowing and being reacting to the hit. And there's a lot more details there, right? Because his body's gonna be kind of simplified since he's not wearing much. So just a reminder that the usek is actually meant for more like higher ranked people in Egypt, like nobles, pharaohs, and deities. But it's also used for elite soldiers and officials. And that's what I'm having here because the story of this Moabite soldier is actually the King Eglon of the Bible, where he gets blessed by the Israelite God to overthrow Israel and the people. But since Egypt is still in somewhat control of the regions and they're the strongest dominating culture at the time, I wanted this fall or this test of battle between the Moabite king here, Eglon, and an elite soldier, an Egyptian soldier, and not just a grunt, right? Because it needs to kind of show an authority and a power change for him to start taking over Jericho and north of the Dead Sea and these areas. So that's why I kind of built in this Usek as a representation for an elite soldier. Also, he's a little bit thicker, stronger, well fed. He's not scrawny. Um, I think the thing that kind of
We'll
gives
get
away the
into all that
most
later.
is the design of
But right
his
now, let's just get this
shinty, which is the or
outfit
skinty,
drawn
however you may
out.
say it. It's this part here that I'm drawing that has the wrappings around his waist. It's usually made of linen. It's lightweight. It's hot in Egypt, so it's got to be. And it also gives a lot of mobility for the soldiers. But the flaps that I'm creating in the front are usually given to elite soldiers as well, and that's just protect the goods, you know. But so these kind of a little hints and throws towards the quality of soldier he is fighting. One of actually my biggest regrets is that when I was younger, I went to Egypt and the Cairo Museum, and this was before their new Cairo Museum, which is I see is quite amazing. But I plan on going back with my wife and seeing it because I'm sure it has so much more to it. But when I went, it was really cool. But I regret not taking more photos of the artifacts and the equipment and everything, just because it's just a better reference. I know that books have photos, but they don't really get much. And if you have a camera, you can really get a 360 view of a lot of these things. I recently went to Mexico City and they had a lot of armors that I wanted to kind of study. So I was able to get my camera on my phone and like get a full 360, which is a far better reference. And I highly recommend if you live in a cultural area and you have that ability to take videos and photos of these things at museums and offer them online for people to use as references and data, go for it. I hope to make a reference thing on my website and have people allowed to use it and study it as well because that's one of the things I wish I had more of. Books do great, but then you have to go buy the book and find the book that has the right stuff. And there's just a website that has a lot of really good information and video, high quality footage to reference from. Man, it would save me a lot of time. But okay, I'm almost done drawing these soldiers. Now it's the time to take on this pencil, which is a Blackwing Pencil, which is I think an HB or a 2B. It's kind of bolder. You can see how dark it is, and it's very soft. I really enjoy it. It's really fun to draw and write with because it's so soft. But what I enjoy about it is that whenever I need to outline and really bring the characters, I guess the outline of the character really, which somehow brings out the whole picture. This does a good job. Something bold. I don't use the 2H anymore or the 4H, which I think the 2H here is what I was using to sketch them in. And this is really good because it's easy to erase. But as you'll see at the end of the drawing, the 2H, because it's so hard and sharp, it actually cut into my paper pretty deep. And I didn't realize it until when I was shading at the end. And you'll see these white lines that kind of look glimmer and glisten, across the page. And that is not cool. I don't need that, don't want that. That's my fault for drawing too hard or just not noticing that there was a part of the pencil that was really sharp, maybe sticking out because it wasn't sharpened correctly. And I see this in a lot of people's drawings, especially a lot of beginner drawers and artists. They do it not thinking about it. I obviously still do it. So you'll see it at the end. You'll be like, what are these white lines? In reality, when you see it, the picture, it's going to be fine. But under lighting and under any kind of camera, you're going to see, you know, these kind of issues. Once I ink it, it'll kind of disappear. So I'm not really too worried. But for pencil work, you definitely don't want to have those scratches in the paper. But as I was saying before, the Blackwing pencil here or anything bold really helps bring out the image and keeps everything separated. I kind of go around all the major points that I want to remind myself that I have definition to the drawing. And as I'm doing this, I'm realizing, okay, well, I'm not going to outline everything. I just need, the particulars so I don't, because my hand's rubbing away some of the lead and the graphite, I lose detail and I will forget once I start doing it. So I'm coming in here and shading and just outlining where it needs to go and what will help me be reminded. And this might be a good helpful tip for you. Draw it once, do the drawing, and then come in and fix it, right? With a thicker, bolder pencil. Instead of erasing and drawing it all over again, you can just kind of draw over it or move the lines slightly with a darker pencil instead of having to erase it and draw it all over, right? As I'm doing this, I'm putting in splatter from like this guy getting smashed, the blood just going everywhere. There's actually a technique that's better than drawing the blood. It's actually shading it or doing your normal drawing. And then taking an eraser, like an electric eraser or a fine tip eraser, and then erasing the graphite from the paper, revealing the splatter of liquid or whatever it may be. In this case, it is blood from his face getting smashed in with a rock. And it's time for a cookie and milk. This is also important. Sugar helps me stay awake. Okay, so now we have them outlined. This is looking good, but man, there's a lot of blank space. So in order to fix all of that, I started to put the faces in close-ups. So I found some references for faces that have been smashed in and kind of, manipulated it a little bit to kind of resemble my character and have him really getting hit. Now, the wrinkles of the rock on the cheek right here coming up, I just kind of winged it and just pushed my face against the mirror, looked in the mirror and pushed my hand against it and saw where the wrinkles kind of come up and then kind of replicated that. And it did good. And then I have his tooth flying out. And this is all to kind of build a better scene because just having these two soldiers go at it isn't very fun when I can have the rest of the page filled out. Now, my art teacher back in high school always got on to me because I never filled out the rest of the page. She was like, okay, cool, you drew one character on the page. He's just standing there in a blank whiteness. There's no details, no information of anything. It's just a cool looking character. That's all he is. So I thought I was going to be a character designer when I was younger, growing up. But then I realized I wanted to tell stories and build out an image. And to do so, you got to fill out the whole page. I highly recommend you fill out the whole page because it also builds your creativity and your skills much quicker than, leaving it blank. As I'm drawing in the rest of the space, I'm keeping in mind the shadows here. It's a lot different from the character's face being smashed to his left, and that is because I want to dramatize and build a different type of detail. Now, because the clothing and the details in the foreground characters in the fight are going to be highly detailed textures and textile, but the skin is going to be left blank. And in order to have these guys pop out, I'm building this character in the back, which has a lot more shadows. and a lot more darkness to it. And the darkness of this character's face will push the foreground forward. As well as this rock that I'm drawing, the stone will have a lot of detail to it. So hopefully it'll separate from the skin, which will have less, right? And that's a technique that I've learned from other artists and some of the greats before, and they do this. And you could do it like a Bernie Wrightson style and have everything really detailed, which is really cool. But in that case, his inking has a flow to each stroke, where mine is a little bit more, I guess, chaotic because I'm pushing different themes and different ways of drawing all the time, and that's just my style. I'm not as good as Bernie. Bernie is an amazing artist, but you can see here that I'm just kind of shading in a lot, and that's going to bring out the drawing heavily for the foreground characters to be seen when the viewer looks at it right away. So when I'm drawing the Usek here, I'm also remembering that I have to keep in the time period, like the second intermediate period of Egypt or the New Kingdom, which is like the Age of Empire, right? We're talking about 1650 all the way up to like 1060 BC. And that's whenever these Shintis and these Useks are being used. It's also, you probably know some of these Egyptian famous people in this time period, like Ramses II and Tutankhamun and Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut. You know what? Their names are tough, but you get who I'm talking about, and they're great. I think I want to draw some of those characters eventually because they have a lot of historical references, and of course I love Egypt, so I might give it a go. But for now, let's move over to Moabite, who has a lot less reference, and he's just this desert dude right on the coast of the Dead Sea. And the Moabites were pretty rough and brutal. They worshipped the god Chemosh, who was a child sacrifice god at one point, but he was in the pantheon of Yahweh and El and Astarte and all the gods of the Bible, which is really cool because at one point I mentioned probably in another video is that Yahweh, the Israelite God, the Christian God, actually gives King Eglon, the Moabite king here, authority to overthrow. He's the one who blesses him, which means he kind of works with Chemosh, this other god. And I really like building out these stories because the ancient West Semitic people had a lot of different types of gods and they worship together. And this is, Chemosh is the patron god of the Moabites, which was also known as the war deity, kind of like Yahweh was to the Israelites. War gods were very popular because you're always being attacked and overthrowing and, just taking over land. But they thought that Chemosh was blessing them. This god is also known as the destroyer and the subduer, which is what I'm trying to portray with King Eglon, the Moabite soldier here. I want him to start off as this really kind of strong, brutal kind of looking dude. He's got a thick beard. He's well dressed, but he's got a slight feminine touch to him a little bit at one point with eyeshadow and which I don't know if they have eyeshadow back then, but I'm just going to darken it in. If the Egyptians wore it, then who knows. But he'll have probably some jewelry and some earrings and stuff like that, just to give a little bit of a hint of that. Because in my story, he's different from the normal strongman, but he will be built like that. In the book of Judges, he becomes a heifer, a really fat dude. I mean, really heavy set guy. So I need him to already have a build of strength and like this big bodybuilder looking thing. And as he gets kind of lets himself go, that muscle turns into fat and we get the story to build out, right? Now that I'm drawing his beard and up close, I'm actually going to put the details in his wrinkles and his face. But for the beard, it's going to be kind of all blacked out, it's shaded all black. And I'm going to go in there and kind of put the details in ink later, obviously. But the way I do it is actually I put in a short that you can watch, but it's using the eraser tool to pull away the shaded parts to reveal hair and the shine on hair. This was also used for doing liquids or blood or anything like that. Just using the eraser is much easier than drawing each and every single hair. Though, if you are to use a graphite pencil and you want to do realism, drawing with each hair in a different weighted pencil would definitely give you the more realistic look. But in the end, you would still use the eraser to pull out the highest and brightest whites in the hair. But for now, I'm just going to shade it all one flat color and then put in the details later. And that's a simple technique just to remind myself, where the shadows go, where the blacks are, where, what the beard is, because otherwise it might merge in with the other parts of his face. Now, I have a big issue with drawing the mouths. Sometimes they look too flat or too stretched out, or a little bit weird. And that's just something that I need to work more on and using references with. But I'm getting there. I think that's one of those things that can look flat if you don't do it right, or look kind of obscure if you put too much dimension into the mouth on the edges. Now, what I'm doing right now is I'm shading in a darker, pressing a little bit harder to get a darker shade from this pencil underneath the beard, and that's to separate the beard from the neck. Otherwise, it would just all be, one shade, and I'll lose detail on where the beard ends and the neck begins. But that's something that I'll go in later with the other pencil, the Blackwing, and just really darken and thicken out the lines and outline everything. So now that I have the Blackwing, I'm going to start from top to bottom, so that way I don't smear the soft lead and graphite anywhere else, which I eventually still do a little bit on where my hand is right now on these guys who I drew earlier. This is something, that's why I wear the glove. Otherwise, my hand's going to turn silver. The bottom part, and I'm just going to smear it everywhere, which is, annoying. So, a little personal preference of my art. You'll notice that my art pieces are not super dynamic in the angles in which I'm telling the story, as if I'm not showing the angle from below his face, or this fight isn't coming from underneath his legs looking up, like in comic books, you have extremely exaggerated angles and really cool features that will promote action. And this is the creativity of the artist, and it's very cool, very, very cool. But unlike me, so while comic artists may do that, some of your classical artists, especially ones that I admire, like Gustave Doré, they do more direct and flat image where you kind of see the whole image being portrayed in as a scene where everybody's kind of visible. There's not super strong angles. You're kind of looking at it from a side view or from just a normal person standing view, which is what I kind of like. I like being eye level and kind of showing things from a side, almost like a 2D video game in a sense, but a little bit more details and, of course, a little bit more angle. But it's a difference between someone like Gustav versus Bernie Wrightson. There's just different angles, and there's a little different, that technique has got a different vibe. Maybe that's something you jive with, and maybe that's something you, have maybe wonders of like how to develop more in. And I find that practicing different angles is always going to be helpful, and it really helps bring out your image in different ways, especially when you're doing storytelling. But you don't have to beat yourself up if you do not have very dynamic angles in your stories. I mean, like this isn't a very dynamic image, but it has action, and the scene is telling exactly what I want it to tell. And I like Gustav a little bit more than I like Bernie, just because the detail is so intense on Gustave Doré, and then he plays with these lines so much more intricately. But Bernie Wrightson definitely has so much beauty in his line work. So they both have their benefits, but finding your groove is really fun and something you shouldn't beat yourself up over if it doesn't have that comic book dynamic look to it. Now, again, I am going over the outlining of this character, and this is just to separate the image and darken it, and shading it with a softer pencil now, making it darker, feels so much better because it really brings out the image. The thing is that when I sharpen this pencil to continue drawing, I have to be careful not to create too sharp of an edge, otherwise I'll dig into the paper, just like with the 2H pencil I had before, or anything that's got that lead that's going to be really pushing against the paper. But I'm shading in one direction. I'm not going everywhere on his face. Now, there's a technique of shading in different directions. If the hair is kind of like a matte and it's got the hairs flowing in different directions. Then you can shade in different directions and pull in a technique of where it kind of gives that vibe that the hair is going everywhere. But for the face, I'm going to keep it in one direction, just because I've realized that in that it kind of feels like a motion going away, that the shading actually pushes this feeling of him being pushed to the right because I'm shading everything at an angle. Whereas if I was to shade it up and down or perfectly horizontal, I may get a different vibe from it all. Not that that really matters because I'm going to ink it all, but whenever I'm sketching, I like to be in the moment with the character and kind of build out the details in this way. Um, and now, I'm putting in other details around his, like the wrinkles and stuff. This isn't fully necessary because it's going to get smeared anyways, and I probably will lose it in translation. But I'm in the mood, so I'm going for it. Now, as I mentioned before, there are scratches on the paper. You can see them here now that there's a little bit of a glare and these white lines up here, and the depth of the lead in the paper is there. So if you look closely on that hand that I just showed where the scratches were, you'll see there's a whole bunch of deep lines, and that's from having too sharp of a lead pencil. And me pressing down, of course, too hard. This destroys the paper. Not really recoverable. When you shade, you will have these crevices where there'll be inconsistencies. You might see some artists with a pencil that's really sharpened and it's a very long lead tip, and they're very lightly drawing on the paper. That's how you get those beautiful masterpiece pencil work where there's super great gradients and depth, because they're not scratching the paper, they're not pressing too hard, and though the process takes way longer, it looks way more beautiful to do that. In my situation, I'm going to be inking over this, so it doesn't really matter. But I do want to have some detail. And you can see I'm missing spots all over here in the close-up. But I'm still trying to stay consistent with shading in one direction at least. And the dark lines that are right at the edge of something like a highlight and then moves into a shaded area that you might darken is called a terminator line. And that's just something that happens whenever you have a shadow that starts, right? You have this darker area, then there's a reflective light that kind of brings that shadow a little bit brighter than right at the edge. So remember, if you want to add a little bit more realism to your drawing, you want to add that terminator line to really divide the highlights and the shading with the darker kind of little shaded area across that line area. In this character right now where I'm doing all the shading of his clothing, you don't have any really Terminator. You have one right on his belt, but it's not much. And here I'm not going to really do any Terminator lines. I'm just going to shade it all pretty much one tone, one direction, and keep it simple. But it definitely looks good. I like it because it kind of gives the vibe that the hair is flowing in one direction too, and it just looks cleaner. So whenever you're drawing, if your shading always looks kind of goofy, it could be because you're shading in all these different directions. You're moving your page around and like this, unless you want to do that, right? But I recommend one direction keeps it looking clean, and it doesn't feel too messy. Now, this is a different concept that whenever I'm using the ink, I'm going to be doing more contouring, right? I'm going to be going against the muscles and around the shapes with the ink in order to build more of a cross-hatching design that's a contouring cross-hatching, and that'll look nicer. And whenever I'm doing his beard with ink, I'll probably be doing more like circular hair strokes because it'll just build out that idea, right? But yeah, I'm coming to a conclusion of outlining everything with this heavy, dark, bold pencil. And once I'm done, what I'm actually going to do is erase it all. And that's something that I do to get rid of all that extra lead, because your pens, especially if you have a felt tip, or really any pen, it's going to pick up what's over on the paper. And if you got graphite on the paper, it's going to pick it up and it's going to get clogged and it's going to mess up your pens. So I don't want to keep on cleaning my pens, which I'll still have to do. But if I take a putty eraser and roll it over top and pull all of that graphite off and still remain the details and the dark shading that I've been doing, then it's going to be 1,000 times easier to just ink over it and get those heavy shadows in, and everything without um, having to clean my tips of my pens all the time. And I don't know if you're like this, but whenever you do work on a pencil drawing and you go like full detail and you really enjoy it, sometimes it's hard to ink it. I know that every time I do a pencil drawing, I'm like, should I ink it? Like, should I scan it in, then ink it? Because I really enjoy the pencil look. It feels cool. It feels natural. It might not be perfect, but if I do a pen and I screw it up, I screw it up, right? Like it's over, game over. Um, but I think the excitement of messing up and having that permanency is really, it's kind of fun. It's kind of exciting. It's like gets my blood boiling a little bit because the fear of messing up keeps me paying attention to drawing as well, and I have to live with my mistakes. Okay, remember when I was saying I was shading in different directions to kind of give the hair the texture? This is one of those examples. I'm now shading his hair a little bit in different directions to kind of give a vibe that it's matted up and it has texture to it. And it works really well with pencil. And it works well with pen as well. But I'm only giving a few more shadows in the hair and leaving the rest kind of like the sun is beating down from one angle. And now that I got the shadows in there, I'm going in with the electric eraser and bringing back those highlights where I can. And sometimes I have to sharpen the eraser a little bit because it turns into like a round edge and doesn't do a good job. But you can see how it's bringing back some detail. This saves me the time from drawing it. And then I'm going to go in and put in some darker, lines and details into it again. So that way it looks like hair instead of just erase marks or accidents. And you can see how it kind of gives that shine. And this is pretty much the video. Thank you guys for watching this whole entire sketch video. If you did, hey, I'm an artist. Please like and subscribe to my channel in this video. That definitely would help me out and encourage me to do more. I hope that you are drawing. I hope that this has been helpful for you. And you check out my other videos. I'm really trying to make this full time and enjoy it. And on the journey, take you along with me. But here it is. You can see those mess ups of those high bright lines. This is the final penciling drawing. There's a white space above their heads for text. But yeah, here's how it looks. And the next video will be about me inking it, and you're going to see how I transform this pencil drawing into an ink drawing, something that'll go on the page and be surrounded by text. And yeah, this is King Eglon versus an Egyptian soldier. And thank you for watching. And don't forget, if you're a creative, hey, go create.